The massive silverback gorilla stands face to face with death itself, a 20-foot rock python coiled around a dying zebra, its massive jaws slowly crushing the life from its victim. 4 male lions circle like vultures, their golden eyes gleaming with predatory patience, waiting for the perfect moment to claim not one, but 3 victims. The young zebra's desperate cries pierce the African air as the python's grip tightens with each passing second. The silverback, muscles rippling beneath his dark coat, makes a decision that will either save a life or cost him his own. With a thunderous roar that shakes the very ground, he launches himself at the serpent, grabbing its massive head with hands powerful enough to crush bone. But the lions are moving now. 4 apex predators, each weighing over 400 pounds of pure muscle and razor-sharp claws, begin to close in. This isn't just a rescue anymore, it's a death trap. And somewhere in the distance, a park ranger watches through binoculars, his hand trembling as he reaches for his vehicle's ignition, knowing that what he's about to do could cost him his career or his life. In 30 seconds, everything will change. Lives will be lost or saved, heroes will emerge, and the impossible will become reality. But to understand how this heart-stopping moment came to be, how a gentle giant became a warrior, how a predator became a victim, and how a human broke every rule to save them all, we need to go back to where it all began, in the unforgiving wilderness of the African savanna. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I need you to do something for me. In the comments below, tell me what country you're watching from. I want to see how far this amazing story reaches around the world. And if you're ready for more unbelievable wildlife stories that will leave you speechless, hit that subscribe button for Wind Echo Untold right now. Trust me, after what you're about to witness, you'll never look at nature the same way again. Deep in the heart of Tanzania's Ruaha National Park, where the African sun beats down mercilessly on endless stretches of golden grassland, lives a creature of extraordinary intelligence and gentle strength. His name, given by the researchers who have studied him for over a decade, is Kessie, which means born during difficult times in Swahili. And never has a name been more prophetic. Kessie is a mountain gorilla, but not just any mountain gorilla. At 450 pounds of solid muscle and standing nearly 6 feet tall, he is what researchers call a silverback, a mature male whose distinctive silver-gray hair across his back marks him as the undisputed leader of his small family group. But Kessie's story is one of solitude, not leadership. 3 years ago, Kessie lost everything. Poachers invaded his territory, and in the chaos that followed, his entire family was scattered to the winds. His mate, Amara, disappeared without a trace. His 3 young offspring, 2 playful juveniles and 1 infant barely old enough to leave his mother's arms, vanished into the vast wilderness. Search parties found no bodies, no signs of struggle beyond the initial attack, just emptiness. Since that devastating day, Kessie has wandered alone through territories that once echoed with the playful chatter of his family. He moves through the landscape like a ghost, a 450-pound shadow of his former self. The other animals give him a wide berth, not out of fear, but out of respect for his palpable grief. Even the elephants, those gentle giants of the savannah, seem to understand that this creature carries a burden beyond physical strength. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the lead primatologist who has tracked Kessie since he was a juvenile, describes him as a gentle soul trapped in the body of a warrior. Her research notes, spanning over 12 years, paint a picture of an individual whose capacity for empathy extends far beyond his own species. She has documented 17 separate instances where Kessie intervened to help other animals in distress, from untangling an antelope caught in abandoned fishing wire to gently guiding lost elephant calves back to their herds. Kessie doesn't see species boundaries the way most animals do. Dr. Martinez explains in her field journal, he sees suffering and he responds. It's as if his own loss has made him hyper-aware of others' pain. But today, this gentle giant's greatest test is about to begin. Today, His instinct to help others will place him in a situation so dangerous, so impossible, that it will require every ounce of his strength, intelligence, and courage just to survive. 50 yards away from where Kessie sits contemplating the morning sun, a young zebra named Django is making the mistake of his short life. At barely 18 months old, Django is what researchers call a bachelor stallion, too young to lead his own herd, but old enough to strike out on his own in search of territory and eventual mates. But Django carries a secret that makes him vulnerable in ways he cannot understand. Born with a respiratory condition that causes him to breathe heavily and tire quickly, he has always been the weakest member of his birth herd. His mother, Zuri, spent countless hours teaching him to conserve energy, to choose his battles, to always stay close to protection. But teenage arrogance and hormonal surges have overridden maternal wisdom. This morning, Django has wandered far from any herd, drawn by the promise of a small watering hole he spotted from a ridgeline. The water source lies in a depression surrounded by thick brush and fallen logs, what park rangers call a predator pocket, a natural trap that gives cover to hunters while limiting escape routes for prey. As Django approaches the water, his labored breathing becomes more pronounced. The respiratory condition that has plagued him since birth makes every breath a conscious effort, and the morning heat is already beginning to take its toll. He needs water desperately, but he also needs rest. He doesn't notice the subtle rustle in the undergrowth 20 feet to his left. Hidden in the shadows of a massive fallen baobab tree lies Nyoka, a 23-foot African rock python whose very name inspires terror throughout the region. Nyoka is what herpetologists call a super predator, a snake so large and experienced that she has moved beyond typical. Python prey like antelope and warthogs to hunt creatures that most snakes wouldn't dare approach. At nearly 300 pounds, Nyoka is a living fortress of muscle and scale. Her girth is greater than a telephone pole, her strength sufficient to crush the ribcage of a Cape buffalo. But it's not just her size that makes her legendary among the animal kingdom, it's her intelligence and patience. For the past 6 days, Nyoka has been lying in wait near this watering hole. Her cold, calculating eyes have watched dozens of potential meals come and go, but she has held back, waiting for the perfect victim. Too many zebras traveling in groups. Too many alert antelope that spotted her before approaching. Too many elephants whose massive size made even her think twice. But now, watching Django struggle for breath at the water's edge, she knows her patience has been rewarded. Django lowers his head to drink, his vulnerable neck extended, his attention focused entirely on the life-giving water. He takes one sip, then another, his respiratory distress making him pant between drinks. That's when Nyoka strikes. 23 feet of pure muscle explodes from the undergrowth with a speed that defies physics. In less than 2 seconds, her massive coils wrap around Django's torso, her head securing a grip just behind his front legs. The young zebra doesn't even have time to cry out before the air is crushed from his lungs. But this is where Nyoka makes her first mistake. Instead of going for the quick kill that her usual prey would require, she begins the slow, methodical process of constriction that works so well on larger, stronger animals. Each time Django exhales, she tightens her grip slightly, preventing him from drawing in a full breath. Each time his heart beats, she adjusts her coils to restrict blood flow just a little more. It's a technique that has served her well for over 15 years of hunting. But today, it will give her prey just enough time to call for help. And in the distance, someone is listening. The sound that pierces the morning air is unlike anything Kessie has heard before. It's not the typical bark of alarm that zebras make when fleeing from lions, nor the sharp whinny of fear that signals a leopard attack. This is something far more desperate, a sound that speaks of imminent death. Kessie's massive head swivels toward the source of the distress call, his keen eyes scanning the landscape until they lock onto the depression near the watering hole. What he sees there triggers something primal in his DNA, something that transcends species, territory, and self-preservation. The young zebra is disappearing beneath the coils of the massive python. His struggles becoming weaker with each passing second. Most animals would see this scene and either flee or simply ignore it as the natural order of things. But Kessie is not most animals. He rises to his full height, his 450 pounds of muscle moving with surprising grace through the scattered acacia trees. Each step is calculated, purposeful, as his tactical mind, honed by years of protecting his lost family, begins to assess the situation. The python is massive, easily the largest predator he has ever encountered. Her position gives her every advantage, wrapped around her prey, with the leverage of the ground beneath her. But Kessie also notices something else that most observers would miss. The zebra is still fighting, weakly, desperately, but fighting nonetheless. And in that continued struggle, Kessie sees something that connects directly to his deepest trauma, a young creature about to lose its life, while others stand by and watch. His first approach is cautious. Despite his size and strength, Kessie is not naturally aggressive. His instinct is to intimidate rather than fight, to use his massive presence to discourage conflict rather than engage in it. He begins with a series of low, rumbling vocalizations, sounds that carry for miles and serve as both a warning and a challenge. Nyoka, locked in her death grip around Django, barely acknowledges the gorilla's presence. She has dealt with scavengers before, hyenas, jackals, even young lions who thought they could steal her kills. A simple, aggressive display usually sends them running. She increases her pressure on the zebra and prepares to wait out this new annoyance. But Kessie doesn't retreat. Instead, he begins a behavior that researchers have rarely documented in wild gorillas. He starts to circle the python and her victim, studying the situation from every angle like a general planning a battle. What he discovers in his reconnaissance is both encouraging and terrifying. The python's greatest strength, her position wrapped around the zebra, is also her greatest weakness. She cannot easily maneuver or defend herself from multiple angles while maintaining her death grip. But she is also far larger than any opponent he has ever faced, with teeth designed to hold prey and muscles that could potentially crush even his powerful frame. Kessie's first attack comes from behind, a calculated strike at what he perceives to be Nyoka's weakest point. Using his long, powerful arms, he grabs the python's tail section and pulls with all his considerable strength. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Nyoka's carefully calibrated constriction is disrupted as her body is stretched in two different directions. For a moment, it seems like the simple plan might work. Django gasps in a precious breath of air, his first full breath in over 2 minutes. But Nyoka's response is swift and brutal. Rather than release her prey, she uses Kessie's pull as leverage, whipping her massive head around in an arc that catches the gorilla completely off guard. The python's strike doesn't connect with Kessie's flesh, but the impact of 300 pounds of muscle and scale slamming into his shoulder sends him tumbling backward. He recovers quickly, his natural agility serving him well, but the message is clear. This will not be easy. What follows is a brutal test of endurance, intelligence, and will. Kessie launches attack after attack, each one more desperate than the last. He tries to grab Nyoka's head, but her scales are too slick and her strength too great. He attempts to unwrap her coils from the zebra, but each time he loosens one section, she tightens another. Minutes pass, like hours. Django's struggles become weaker and weaker, his eyes beginning to glaze over as oxygen deprivation takes its toll. Kessie can see death approaching, and it triggers memories he has spent 3 years trying to suppress, the helplessness he felt watching his family disappear, the crushing weight of being unable to protect those he loved. In his desperation, Kessie makes a critical error. He abandons his tactical approach and goes for a frontal assault, charging directly at Nyoka's head with all his strength and fury. It's exactly what the experienced predator has been waiting for. Nyoka releases just enough pressure on the zebra to give herself maneuvering room, then strikes with the speed of lightning. Her massive jaws clamp down on Kessie's left arm, her backward curving teeth designed to hold rather than cut. For a moment, gorilla and python are locked in a deadly embrace, each using their greatest strengths against the other. But now, Kessie faces a terrifying realization. If Nyoka abandons the zebra completely and focuses her attack on him, his size advantage becomes meaningless. Python constriction has killed prey far larger than a 450-pound gorilla, and once those coils wrap around his torso, the battle will be over in minutes. This is the moment when most animals would retreat, when survival instinct would override any altruistic impulses. But as Kessie stares into Nyoka's cold, reptilian eyes, he doesn't see a monster. He sees the same predator that has been stalking the nightmares of his lost family. Every poacher, every threat that took away everything he loved. And that's when 4 new players enter the game. The sound of heavy paws on dried grass announces their arrival before they come into view. 4 male lions moving in perfect formation, their golden manes catching the afternoon light like crowns of fire. These are not the young, inexperienced males that often wander in bachelor groups. These are mature, battle-scarred warriors in their prime, each weighing over 400 pounds of pure, predatory excellence. Their leader, a magnificent specimen with a mane so dark it appears almost black, assesses the scene with the tactical precision of a military commander. His name, unknown to the human observers who occasionally spot him, is Jengo, the same name as the trapped zebra, meaning to build in Swahili. But where the zebra represents potential cut short, this lion embodies power at its absolute peak. Jengo the lion has survived challenges that would have killed lesser predators. He bears the scars of territorial disputes, encounters with elephants, even a confrontation with a Cape buffalo that left him with a permanently damaged left eye. But it's not his physical prowess that makes him truly dangerous. It's his intelligence and patience. He immediately recognizes what his human counterparts would call a perfect storm scenario. A massive python, locked in combat with a silverback gorilla. Both predators focused entirely on each other, both burning energy at an unsustainable rate, and a young zebra, weakened to the point of helplessness, lying in the middle of it all, like a prize waiting to be claimed. But Jengo the lion knows better than to rush in. He has seen what happens to impatient predators who interrupt feeding pythons. He has scars from a similar encounter in his youth. Instead, he signals to his 3 companions with barely perceptible movements of his ears and tail. They understand immediately and begin to spread out in a loose circle around the battle. The psychology of what happens next is as sophisticated as any military strategy. The lions don't attack, they simply wait. But their presence adds a completely new dimension of terror to an already impossible situation. Kessie becomes aware of the lion's presence just as he manages to break free from Nyoka's bite. His arm bears deep puncture wounds, but nothing vital has been damaged. However, the sight of 4 apex predators positioning themselves around the battlefield fills him with a dread that goes beyond physical fear. Now he faces an impossible choice. Continue fighting the python and risk being overwhelmed when the exhausted winner becomes easy prey for the lions. Or retreat and abandon the zebra to certain death, not just from the python, but from the pride that will surely claim the weakened animal the moment Nyoka finishes her kill. For a creature whose entire identity has been shaped by his failure to protect his family, the choice is no choice at all. Kessie adjusts his tactics completely. What happens next showcases the guerrilla intelligence that has fascinated researchers for decades. Instead of continuing his direct assault on the python, Kessie begins what can only be described as psychological warfare. He starts moving in unpredictable patterns, never approaching from the same angle twice, never allowing either the python or the lions to anticipate his next move. His vocalizations change as well. Instead of the aggressive roars and chest beating that characterized his earlier attacks, he begins producing a series of complex sounds that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Some are directed at the python, sharp staccato barks designed to startle and disorient. Others are aimed at the zebra, gentle, encouraging sounds remarkably similar to the vocalizations he once used to comfort his own young. But the most sophisticated sounds are reserved for the lions. Kessie begins producing what researchers call displacement vocalizations, sounds that don't communicate aggression or submission, but rather suggest the presence of a much larger threat nearby. It's a form of audio camouflage that essentially tells the lions that a more dangerous predator might be approaching the area. The effect is subtle but significant. While the lions don't retreat, their attention becomes divided. They find themselves scanning the surrounding landscape for threats that don't exist. Their perfect formation becoming slightly less coordinated as uncertainty creeps in. Meanwhile, Kessie's new approach begins to take its toll on Nyoka. The constant harassment prevents her from settling into the patient, energy-conserving constriction that is her preferred killing method. She finds herself having to actively defend her position every few seconds, burning precious energy that she would normally reserve for the final kill. Most critically, Django the zebra begins to show signs of recovery. The brief moments when Nyoka's grip loosens to deal with Kessie allow him to draw deeper breaths and begin to regain some strength. His eyes, which had begun to dim with approaching death, start to show renewed alertness, but this new strategy comes with its own tremendous risks. Kessie is essentially fighting a battle on 5 fronts simultaneously: the python, 4 lions, and the clock. Every second that passes drains his energy reserves, and he knows that the moment his strength begins to fail, the lions will sense the opportunity and strike. The tension builds to an almost unbearable level as all 6 massive predators, gorilla, python, and 4 lions, maneuver around each other in a deadly dance that could explode into violence at any moment. The air itself seems to vibrate with potential energy, like the moment before lightning strikes, and then, from the ridgeline overlooking the depression, comes the sound that changes everything: the roar of an internal combustion engine starting up. Ranger Michael Thompson has been watching the impossible scene unfold through his binoculars for the past 27 minutes, his hands shaking with a combination of awe and professional frustration. In 15 years of wildlife management across 3 different African parks, he has never witnessed anything approaching this level of complexity and drama. Thompson, a 38-year-old former military officer from South Africa, came to conservation work after serving 2 tours as a peacekeeping soldier in Somalia. He thought he had left behind the impossible life-or-death decisions that once defined his daily existence. But as he watches the magnificent silverback gorilla risk everything to save a creature from a completely different species, he realizes that some battles choose you, regardless of where you try to run. Park protocol is absolutely clear in situations like this: observe and document, but never interfere. The natural world operates by its own rules, and human intervention, no matter how well-intentioned, can have unpredictable and often devastating consequences for entire ecosystems. Thompson has enforced this rule dozens of times, watching predator and prey play out their ancient dramas while he remained a passive observer. But this situation is different in ways that protocol never anticipated. This isn't simply nature taking its course. This is a moral choice being played out in real time. The gorilla has already made his decision, choosing compassion over safety, self-sacrifice over survival. The question now is whether a human will do the same. Thompson's radio crackles to life. Base to Unit 7, what's your status on the gorilla tracking assignment? The voice belongs to Dr. Sarah Martinez, the primatologist who has been studying Kessie for over a decade. I've got visual on the subject, Thompson responds, his voice tight with controlled emotion. But we have a situation here that's unprecedented. Through the binoculars, he watches as Kessie launches what appears to be a final, desperate assault on the python. The gorilla's energy reserves are clearly running low. His movements have lost some of their earlier precision, and his vocalizations sound increasingly strained. Meanwhile, the 4 lions have tightened their circle, moving closer with each passing minute, as they sense that the battle is reaching its conclusion. Thompson, You need to maintain your distance and document whatever you're seeing. Dr. Martinez's voice carries the authority of someone who has spent her career studying animal behavior. I know Kessie's situation looks dire, but interference could make things worse for everyone involved. Roger that, Thompson replies. But his hand is already moving toward the ignition key of his modified Land Cruiser. What happens next unfolds with the brutal efficiency of a military engagement. Nyoka, sensing that her prey has been weakened enough for the final kill, abandons her defensive posture and wraps 2 additional coils around Django's chest and neck. The young zebra's eyes begin to roll back as his airway is completely compressed. Kessie sees death approaching and makes a decision that defies every survival instinct encoded in his DNA. He charges directly at Nyoka's head, not to attack, but to place his own body between the python's jaws and the zebra's neck. It's a suicide move, one that will almost certainly result in his own death, but might give Django a few precious seconds to escape. The impact when 450 pounds of silverback gorilla collides with 300 pounds of python at full speed is like 2 freight trains meeting head-on. Both animals are sent rolling across the depression in a tangle of fur, scale, and raw muscle. For a moment, it's impossible to tell where the gorilla ends and the python begins. But in that moment of chaos, Django the zebra finds himself free for the first time in over 30 minutes. His legs shake as he tries to stand. His breathing comes in desperate gasps. But he is alive and unrestrained. That's when the lions make their move. Django the lion, the pride leader, sees the opportunity he has been waiting for and launches himself forward with explosive speed. His target isn't the weakened zebra or even the battling python. It's the exhausted gorilla who has just sacrificed his defensive position to save another creature's life. At that moment, with 4 tons of predator and prey locked in mortal combat, with death seeming inevitable for at least 2 of the animals involved, Ranger Thompson makes the decision that will define the rest of his life. He turns the ignition key. The Land Cruiser's diesel engine roars to life with a sound that carries across the African landscape like thunder. But Thompson doesn't stop there. He slams the vehicle into gear and floors the accelerator, sending the heavy truck racing down the hillside toward the depression at speeds that would be suicidal on the rough terrain. Under any other circumstances, the psychological effect on the lions is immediate and devastating. These apex predators, who fear virtually nothing in the natural world, are hardwired with an ancestral terror of human machinery. The sound of the approaching vehicle triggers flight responses that override even their hunting instincts. Django the lion, mere seconds away from claiming the gorilla as his prize, suddenly finds himself caught between predatory desire and species survival. The decision takes less than 2 seconds. With a roar of frustration that can be heard for miles, he abandons his attack and signals for his pride to retreat. The 4 lions bound away from the depression with fluid grace, but not without looking back. Their body language speaks of anger and confusion, emotions rarely seen in such confident predators. They disappear into the tall grass, but Thompson knows they won't go far. They'll wait on the periphery, hoping for another opportunity, but the approaching Land Cruiser has an even more dramatic effect on Nyoka the python. Snakes, despite their fearsome reputation, are fundamentally cautious creatures. They have survived for millions of years by avoiding unnecessary risks and engaging only in battles they are certain to win. The arrival of an unknown variable, a massive, roaring machine operated by humans, transforms the entire risk-benefit calculation of her attack. In less than 10 seconds, she makes the same decision that has kept her species alive since the age of dinosaurs. She releases Kessie from her coils and begins a rapid retreat toward the thickest available cover, her 23-foot body moving with surprising speed across the uneven ground. The sudden absence of crushing pressure around his torso allows Kessie to draw his first full breath in what feels like hours. His body is covered in puncture wounds and scale marks. His left arm bears deep tooth impressions from Nyoka's earlier bite, and his strength is nearly depleted. But he is alive, and more importantly, so is the young zebra he risked everything to save. Thompson's Land Cruiser slides to a stop at the edge of the depression, dust and debris flying everywhere. The ranger sits behind the wheel, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles have turned white, his heart hammering with the realization of what he has just done. He has broken the most fundamental rule of wildlife conservation. He has interfered with nature itself. And yet, as he looks down at the scene below, a massive gorilla gently helping a young zebra to its feet, both animals alive against impossible odds, he feels no regret whatsoever. The silence that follows the chaos is almost deafening. For the first time in over an hour, the only sounds in the depression are the soft panting of exhausted animals and the gentle ticking of the Land Cruiser's cooling engine. It's as if the entire African landscape is holding its breath, processing what it has just witnessed. Django the zebra stands on unsteady legs, his black and white stripes marked with the imprints of Nyoka's coils, but otherwise intact. His breathing, while still labored due to his chronic condition, has returned to a sustainable rhythm. Every few seconds, he shakes his head vigorously, as if trying to clear away the memory of near suffocation. But it's what happens next that will haunt Michael Thompson's dreams for the rest of his life. Kessie the gorilla, despite his own injuries and exhaustion, approaches the young zebra with movements so gentle they seem impossible from such a massive creature. He doesn't touch Django. Gorillas are naturally cautious about physical contact with unfamiliar species, but he positions himself between the zebra and the direction where the lions disappeared, creating a protective barrier with his own body. For nearly 5 minutes, the two animals stand together in what can only be described as mutual recognition. The zebra's dark eyes, still wide with recent terror, seem to focus on the gorilla's face with an intelligence that transcends species boundaries. Kessie's expression, as much as human observers can interpret gorilla facial expressions, appears calm, almost paternal. Dr. Martinez later describes this moment in her field notes as the most profound example of interspecies empathy I have ever documented. It wasn't just that Kessie saved the zebra's life. It's that he seemed to understand the zebra's emotional state and was actively working to provide comfort. Thompson, meanwhile, sits frozen in his vehicle, the magnitude of his career-ending decision beginning to sink in. His radio has been crackling with increasingly urgent calls from park headquarters, but he can't bring himself to respond. How do you explain that you've just witnessed and participated in something that rewrites the textbook on animal behavior? But the most extraordinary moment is yet to come. Kessie, apparently satisfied that Django has recovered enough to move safely, turns his attention toward the Land Cruiser. For a long moment, the silverback gorilla and the human ranger simply observe each other across the 40 yards that separate them. What passes between them in that silence is something that neither Thompson's training nor Dr. Martinez's research has prepared them to understand. There's no aggression in Kessie's posture, no fear, no territorial challenge. Instead, there's something that looks remarkably like acknowledgement. Kessie raises his massive right hand, the same hand that fought a 23-foot python to a standstill, and extends it toward Thompson in what appears to be a gesture of recognition. Not a wave, not a threat, but a simple acknowledgement that one conscious being has recognized the actions of another. Thompson, acting on pure instinct, raises his own hand in response. For 30 seconds, two species that evolution separated millions of years ago share a moment of perfect understanding. Then, as quietly as the crisis began, it ends. Kessie turns and begins walking toward the tree line, moving with the purposeful gait of an animal who has somewhere important to be. Django the zebra, after a moment's hesitation, follows at a respectful distance, not traveling with the gorilla, but clearly seeking the protection of his presence. Thompson watches them disappear into the acacia forest, then finally reaches for his radio. "Base. This is Unit 7, he says, his voice hoarse with emotion. I need to speak with the park director immediately. And Dr. Martinez, you're going to want to come out here. I've got something you need to see. Over the following weeks, the story of what happened in that small depression spreads through the conservation community like wildfire. Thompson's decision to intervene results in an official reprimand and a formal review of his conduct. But it also sparks a global conversation about the ethics of wildlife intervention and the boundaries between observation and action. Dr. Martinez's subsequent research paper, titled Unprecedented Interspecies Altruism, a case study in gorilla empathy and human moral choice, becomes one of the most cited works in modern primatology. Universities around the world use the incident as a case study in both animal behavior and conservation ethics. But perhaps the most remarkable aftermath occurs in the weeks immediately following the rescue. Kessie, rather than returning to his previous solitary existence, begins displaying behaviors that researchers have never documented in wild gorillas. He starts what can only be described as patrol routes, regular circuits through territories frequented by vulnerable animals, particularly young zebras separated from their herds. On 3 separate occasions over the following month, park rangers document Kessie intervening in predator-prey encounters, not always with the dramatic intensity of his battle with Nyoka, but with consistent, purposeful action to protect weaker animals from overwhelming odds. It's as if saving Django awakened something in Kessie, Dr. Martinez notes in her updated field studies. He's found a new purpose, a new family structure built around protection rather than traditional kinship. Django the zebra, meanwhile, makes a full recovery from his ordeal. His respiratory condition remains, but careful observation reveals that his near-death experience has made him more cautious and strategic in his movements. Rather than wandering alone in dangerous areas, he begins associating with older, more experienced zebras who can help guide him away from potential threats. Most remarkably, on 4 documented occasions, Django has been observed in the same general area as Kessie, not traveling together, but existing in what researchers call parallel space, close enough for mutual protection, far enough apart to respect species boundaries. The lions, led by Django the lion, continue to hunt in the area, but park rangers note a marked change in their behavior patterns. They avoid areas where the gorilla is known to patrol, and their hunting strategies become more cautious, more calculated. It's as if the interrupted hunt has taught them that even perfect ambushes can be disrupted by unexpected variables. Nyoka the python simply disappears. Despite extensive searches, no researcher or ranger spots her in the months following the encounter. Some speculate that she retreated to a more remote area of the park, embarrassed by her failure to complete what should have been a routine kill. Others suggest she may have left the territory entirely, seeking hunting grounds where giant gorillas are less likely to interfere with her meals. Thompson, after serving his official reprimand, quietly requests a transfer to the sector of the park where Kessie patrols. His new assignment involves gorilla behavioral monitoring, a position created specifically for him by a park director who understands that some rules are meant to be broken. As I sit here, 3 months after first hearing about this incredible true story, I find myself thinking about the nature of heroism itself. We live in a world that celebrates human heroes, soldiers who risk their lives for strangers, firefighters who run into burning buildings, ordinary people who perform extraordinary acts of courage. But how often do we stop to recognize that heroism exists throughout the natural world, in forms we're only beginning to understand? Kessie the gorilla didn't save Django the zebra because of training or duty or social expectations. He didn't have backup or weapons or any guarantee of survival. He acted purely from a place of empathy, the recognition that another living being was suffering, and the decision that he couldn't stand by and watch it happen. But this story isn't just about animal behavior. It's about the choices we all face when confronted with suffering that isn't our responsibility to fix. Ranger Michael Thompson could have followed protocol. He could have documented the tragedy, and filed his report, knowing that he had done his job correctly, according to every rule and regulation that governed his profession. Instead, he chose compassion over compliance. He chose action over observation. He chose to risk his career for the life of animals he had never met and would likely never see again. In our daily lives, we encounter our own versions of this choice constantly. The homeless person we pass on the street, the co-worker being bullied by management, the neighbor struggling with addiction, the child being ignored at the playground. These moments rarely involve life or death drama, but they all ask us the same fundamental question: will you act or will you observe? The bond between Kessie and Django didn't end when the python retreated and the lions disappeared. According to Dr. Martinez's latest research updates received just last week, the two animals continue to exist in what she calls symbiotic awareness, not traveling together, but maintaining a connection that transcends traditional animal relationships. Kessie has become something unprecedented in gorilla research, a cross-species protector. His patrol routes now cover over 12 square miles of territory, and his interventions have saved the lives of at least 7 other animals, including 2 more zebras, 3 antelope, and remarkably, a lion cub that had been separated from its pride. He's rewritten our understanding of what's possible in terms of animal empathy and moral reasoning, Dr. Martinez told me during our interview last month. Kessie isn't just acting on instinct anymore. He's making conscious choices to help others, even when it offers him no survival advantage whatsoever. The legacy of that 30-minute battle extends far beyond the individuals involved. Thompson's decision has sparked new protocols in wildlife management that account for extraordinary circumstances where intervention might be justified. 3 major conservation organizations have established the Kessie Protocol guidelines for when breaking non-interference. Rules might serve the greater good of ecosystem preservation. The footage captured by Thompson's dashboard camera, yes, the entire encounter was recorded, has become the most watched wildlife video in conservation education history. It's been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms and is now standard viewing in wildlife management courses worldwide. But perhaps most importantly, the story has inspired a new generation of conservationists who understand that protecting wildlife sometimes means getting personally involved. Not just professionally distant, Kessie himself has become something of a legend among local communities surrounding the park. Maasai elders speak of him as Mfalme wa Huruma, the king of compassion, and children in nearby villages draw pictures of the giant gorilla who saves other animals. The young zebra, Django, has grown into a strong adult despite his respiratory challenges. Park rangers report that he has successfully integrated with a stable herd and has even fathered his first foal, a healthy female who shows no signs of breathing difficulties. Even Nyoka the python has left her mark. Her retreat from the battle has become a case study in predator adaptability, showing how even apex predators must sometimes choose strategic withdrawal over certain victory. Herpetologists studying her behavior patterns before and after the encounter have gained new insights into python intelligence and decision-making processes, but it's the lions who perhaps demonstrate the most complex legacy of all. Django the lion and his pride still hunt in the area, but their patterns have evolved in fascinating ways. They've learned to recognize the signs of Kessie's presence and adjust their hunting accordingly. Not out of fear, but out of a kind of respect that researchers are still trying to understand. It's as if the entire ecosystem has been subtly reorganized around the knowledge that intervention is possible, explains Dr. James Worthington, an ecologist who has been studying the long-term effects of the encounter. Predators hunt differently, prey behave differently, and even the vegetation patterns are changing as animal movement routes adapt to new realities. The truth is, we are all faced with moments that test who we really are. Not grand, dramatic moments like the one we've just witnessed, but smaller, quieter moments that happen every single day. The question isn't whether you're brave enough to fight a 23-foot python. The question is whether you're brave enough to help when helping is inconvenient, costly, or risky. Kessie the gorilla didn't know he would survive his battle with Nyoka. Thompson the ranger didn't know his intervention would work or that his career would survive the aftermath. Neither of them had guarantees, backup plans, or certainty that their actions would make any difference at all. What they had was the simple recognition that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do, and that choosing to act, even when the outcome is uncertain, is what separates those who change the world from those who simply observe it changing. The African savanna continues its ancient rhythms, predator and prey locked in their eternal dance. But now, somewhere in the acacia forests of Tanzania, there walks a silverback gorilla who has proven that heroism isn't limited by species. Compassion isn't restricted by evolution, and sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible becomes possible when someone chooses to care more about doing what's right than doing what's safe. And in a small ranger station overlooking that same savanna, a man sits at his desk each morning, binoculars in hand, knowing that he once had the choice between following rules and saving lives. He chose lives, and he would make the same choice again every single day for the rest of his career. The story you've just heard is completely true. Every detail has been verified through park records, scientific documentation, and personal interviews with the people involved. But it's also just one story from a world full of incredible acts of courage, compassion, and connection that happen every single day. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the choices you make when no one is watching, if it reminded you that heroism comes in all shapes and sizes, then I need you to do something for me. First, hit that subscribe button for Wind Echo Untold right now. Because stories like this, stories that challenge what we think we know about the world, stories that show us the extraordinary hiding inside the ordinary, these stories need to be told, and every subscription helps us find and share more of them. Second, in the comments below, tell me about a time when you witnessed an act of unexpected kindness, either between humans or involving animals. It doesn't have to be dramatic or life-threatening. Sometimes the smallest gestures of compassion are the most powerful. I read every single comment, and your stories often inspire the next video we create. Third, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that good still exists in the world. In a time when negative news dominates our feeds and cynicism feels like the default setting, stories like Kessie's remind us that empathy, courage, and selflessness are not extinct. They're all around us, waiting to be recognized and celebrated. Dr. Martinez continues her research on Kessie and has established the Kessie Foundation, dedicated to studying interspecies, empathy, and training the next generation of conservation heroes. If you are interested in supporting their work or learning more about gorilla conservation, I've included links in the description below. Thompson still patrols the same sector of the park, and according to his latest reports, both Kessie and Django are thriving. The gorilla continues his protective patrols, and the zebra has successfully integrated with a herd while maintaining his unique awareness of cross-species cooperation. But most importantly, their story continues to inspire new research, new conservation protocols, and new ways of thinking about our relationship with the natural world. It's proof that one moment of courage, one decision to act instead of observe, one choice to prioritize compassion over convention, can create ripples that change everything. The next time you're faced with your own choice between safety and service, between rules and relationships, between convenience and compassion, remember a 450-pound gorilla named Kessie, who decided that a young zebra's life was worth risking everything for. Remember that heroes don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they simply show up, and sometimes they change the world not through grand gestures, but through the simple act of refusing to look away when someone needs help. What choice will you make? Until next time, this has been Wind Echo Untold, reminding you that the most incredible stories are often the true ones, and the most extraordinary heroes are often the ones we least expect. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and thank you for proving that there are still people in this world who believe that every life matters, every act of kindness counts, and every story of hope deserves to be told. Keep looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary. Keep believing in the power of compassion, and keep sharing these stories, because the world needs to remember what heroes look like. See you in the next video.